Hi, my name's Nicholas Houston, and I'm the Director of Visa Australia. And I'd like to welcome you to our presentation today. And what we're going to be discussing is the kinds of visas that will allow you to apply for permanent residence in Australia through the skilled visa program. The information that we'll talk about today is reasonably basic. So it's to give people who have not had much opportunity to do research into how the system works. It's to give them an overview of the different visas that you can apply for and some of the issues that are currently affecting the skilled visa program. People who have done more research, then there may be some useful aspects that we're going to discuss about skill select and the current number of points that you need to be invited for the visa. But in fact, if you've got more specific questions, we suggest that you contact us later to arrange a time for a formal consultation about your eligibility for the visa. Okay, so as I said, my name's Nicholas Houston. I'm a migration agent, and I'm also a solicitor, which is to say a lawyer, and I've practiced in the jurisdiction of migration for about 15 years now, mostly working with skilled visas, so I've seen a lot in that period of time. And at the end of the day, I hope that this presentation will be helpful and help you clarify what you need to do to get your permanent visa application lodged. Okay, so the Australian Migration Program, there's different ways that you can apply to migrate to Australia. If you've got a family member here, and then in some cases you can apply for a family-sponsored visa. There's humanitarian visas if you are a refugee or find yourself threatened in some ways, in some capacities. You can actually apply for a humanitarian visa. The other way that people apply to migrate is with the nomination of an Australian company. So in fact, Australian companies can sponsor people for temporary work visas, and those visas can be for up to 4 years. But they can also sponsor people for permanent visas. It's a separate process to apply for permanent residence and to migrate to Australia through the company. And the main thing that you need to have is a job offer with an Australian company who is prepared to nominate you for the visa. It is a legal process, and both you and the company have to meet certain criteria to be able to apply for the visa. But the program that we're going to speak about today is the skilled visa program, and essentially the skilled visa program is the heart of the Australian migration program, because it allows people who have no family and no job offer in Australia, and people who have never even been to Australia, to apply to migrate. It's a legal process to apply for the visa, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And there's also certain legal requirements that you have to meet to be eligible for the visa. With the skilled visa, basically it results in permanent residence, and then after 4 years of living in Australia, you can apply for Australian citizenship and the Australian passport without having to abandon your country of origin. So in fact, it's a very generous migration program run by the Australian government, and for that period of 4 years to citizenship is really quick in terms of other standards around the world. In return, the Australian government is looking for a very select group of people who meet the legal requirements, who have the profile, basically, to be able to apply for the visa. So, we're now talking about the skilled visa, and I'd like to talk about the process of applying for the visa first. So, it takes about 12 months to apply for a skilled visa, and it's because there's 5 different steps that you need to go through to complete your application. So in the first case, you need to apply for accreditation in an occupation that's in demand in Australia. So there's a process of accreditation. There's different occupations have different accrediting bodies, and it's the process by which the Australian government looks at your qualifications and work experience, and it's trying to decide whether they're more or less comparable to the qualifications and experience of someone doing your job in Australia. The second step is to complete one of the English language exams. There's now 4 different exams that you can do: the IELTS, the TOEFL internet version, the Pearson Academic or the Cambridge Advanced. You need to have a good level of English, but by good, it's not a super advanced level of English, but a level that actually would allow you to work in Australia in English. It is a key part of the process of applying for the visa, and until you've got the correct level, you can't actually continue with your application. We suggest before taking one of the tests that you do a preparation course, because that is vital in assisting people to get the best result on the day when you take the test. So that's the second step in applying for the visa. The third step in many cases is to apply for state nomination. So what is state nomination? Well, essentially the state governments are able to help select the candidates that can apply for the skilled visa. And the way they do that is by having lists of occupations that are in demand in the particular state. Australia is a big country, and different states and different regions, there's different demand for different occupations. The advantage of state nomination is that you get additional points on the visa points test, that many more occupations can actually apply for the skilled visa with the state nomination because there's many more occupations on the state government lists. And you also get an invitation to apply for the visa under Skill Select. I'll talk a little bit more about Skill Select later on, but state nomination is now a critical component of applying for a skilled visa. The fourth step in applying for the visa is to apply for the visa itself. So the visa application is made online, and then documents are uploaded to the Department of Immigration's portal, applications portal. You can't apply for a skilled visa until you've been invited to apply, and you can't apply until you've been accredited, passed the English exam, and in some cases nominated by the state government. Okay. The final step in the process is that you undertake and provide final documents. It's a medical exam, so they're looking at tuberculosis and other infectious diseases or other chronic conditions that would be expensive to treat in the Australian public health system. So I've done the job for 15 years and we've never had an application refused because someone failed to meet the health test. But it is a formal part of the process, and there can be cases that would create concern. The other part of that is that you need to apply for a police clearance. So you need that for every country where you've lived for 12 months over the last 10 years. And what they're looking for is not if you've been caught speeding or that you have parking tickets, but that you've been sentenced to jail for 12 months. So it's only reasonably significant crimes that would trigger the possibility of having your skilled visa refused because of your poor character. And again, in 15 years of working in the area, we've never had a visa refused because someone had poor character. But those two processes are an important part of applying for the visa. So taken together, you have to complete the process. It takes about 12 months and you have to complete each step as you go. Accreditation, English, nomination, application for the visa, police clearances, and the medical examination. You can apply for the visa from outside Australia. You don't need to be in Australia to apply. You go through those steps and the visa will be granted even though you've never been to Australia. You can also apply for the visa from within Australia, and it's a common strategy for many international students to come to Australia to study for 12 months, or in some cases 2 years, and then apply for a work visa after that period of study, and then in that period of time apply for the skilled visa. It's exactly the same process that you need to go through, whether you're applying after following the route of having studied in Australia, or whether you're applying directly from overseas based on your qualifications and work experience overseas. So that's the process of applying for the visa. I would now like to talk about the specific visas in the skilled visa family that will allow you to migrate. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the Subclass 189 visa. So this is an independent visa, meaning that you don't need a family member to sponsor you, or you don't need a state government to nominate you, but you can apply directly for this visa if you meet the legal criteria. I'm going to talk about the criteria, and then I'm going to jump back and talk about some of the issues in the previous slide. So the legal criteria for the skilled visa are that you have to be under 45 years old, you have to have a proficient level of English, at least proficient level. So proficient is a score of 7 out of 9 on each part of the IELTS test, and it is a pretty good level of English actually, and proficient level produces the additional points on the visa points test. You also need a relevant skills assessment, so this is the accreditation. So you need to have qualifications and work experience that's in listed in an occupation on the federal government's skilled occupations list. There's about 180 occupations on those lists, and most of them are either technical or specialised. So this is where we have engineers, accountants, actuaries, construction project managers, agricultural scientists, we have auditors, many medical and health related occupations, including psychologists, but then also a lot of trades occupations, carpenters, plumbers and chefs. Okay, so there's 180 occupations on that list, and you need to have relevant qualifications and work experience to be accredited in one of those occupations. Then the third thing that you need to do is to pass the points test. So the points test allocates points for different factors: your age, your level of qualification, the number of years of work experience that you have, whether your partner also can be accredited, whether you've studied in Australia, and some other factors as well. With the points test for the Subclass 189 visa, the points that you need is now actually very high. So I'll go back to the previous slide because I want to talk about skill select. And in fact, I'll ask if my colleague can put the link into the chat for skill select so that you can have a look at that yourself. So at the moment, the way the visa system is working, before you can apply for a visa, you need to be invited to apply for the visa. And there are invitation rounds about every 3 to 4 weeks. And effectively, you need to express an interest in applying for the visa first and calculate the points that you think you get in that expression of interest. And then people who have, now it's running at between 75 and 80 points, will receive an invitation to apply for the visa. Okay, the points for the last invitation round are now sitting at between 75 and 80 points before you will receive an invitation to apply for the visa. We have found that in fact that is a very high points test score that you need to apply, and not many people are being invited to apply for the Subclass 189 because not many people reach that level of points. Okay. The issue is that the migration program, the permanent visa program, the target for this year has been reduced to 160,000 places. And that is the same number of visas that were granted last year, even though the target last year was 190,000. They in fact only granted 160,000. And the way that they are restricting the number of visas that they grant is by lifting the points that you need to apply for the Subclass 189 visa. Okay, so that is skill select. It's a significant part of the visa process, and while you may reach those points, and if you do reach those points and meet the other criteria, you will be invited to apply for the visa and can then apply. If you don't have that level of points, then you have to look at other visa options. And with that, I'm going to talk about the Subclass 190 visa. So the Subclass 190 visa is also a permanent visa, and it allows you therefore, after 4 years in Australia, to apply for Australian citizenship and the passport. The skilled nominated Subclass 190 also involves applying for state nomination. Okay, so if you have an occupation in demand in Australian state or territory, you can apply for nomination. So nomination, it's a separate application that you need to make, and you need to demonstrate to the particular state government that you've done some research into available jobs and that you meet the state government nomination policy. Different states have different policies in respect of who they will nominate, and in fact you have to be careful to review as part of your visa strategy which state you would be eligible for to apply for state nomination. The good news about state nomination is that you only need 65 points to apply for the visa. State nomination triggers the invitation to apply, but it also gives you an extra 5 points on the visa points test. So in fact, state nomination in many cases is vital for being able to apply for the skilled visa. Okay, what are the legal requirements? Well, very similar to the Subclass 189 in that you need to be under 45 years old. You need to have competent English, which would be 6 out of 9 on each part of the IELTS test, for example. So you can, in some cases, apply for Subclass 190 visa with a lower level of English. You need to be accredited in an occupation on one of the state government lists. So bear in mind, there's about 400 occupations on the state government lists, and it means that there's many more people, many more occupations and many more people can apply for the skilled visa with the state nomination. You need to be nominated by a state government. Just bear in mind that different states have different nomination policies, and you need to look at those policies particularly to see whether you would be eligible to apply for state nomination. And then you need to score 65 points or more on the visa points test. Okay, so it's an easier visa to apply for, and it's the exact same result, being permanent residence in Australia. Then the third option is to apply for the skilled regional provisional subclass 489 visa. So this visa is a visa valid for 4 years, and you need to live in the region that nominates you for the first 2 years that you're in Australia. After that period of time, if you've worked for 12 months in any job, and that could include working in a supermarket, driving a taxi or an Uber, but after you've lived in the region for that 2-year period, worked for 12 months in any occupation, you can apply for a permanent visa. That application for the permanent visa is very straightforward and not very expensive. So the Subclass 489 is not a permanent visa, but it's a clear pathway to applying for permanent residence and then Australian citizenship. So to apply for the visa, you also need to be sponsored by a state government, or alternatively, if you've got a family member living in regional Australia, that family member can in some cases also sponsor you for the Subclass 489 visa. As I said, you can move on to the permanent visa after you've lived in the region for 2 years and worked in any job for 12 months. Okay, well, what are the basic requirements for the Subclass 489 visa? Again, you have to be under 45 years old when you apply. The Australian government likes you to be young, with many years of paying taxes in front of you. Secondly, you need to be nominated by an Australian state or territory, or sponsored by an eligible relative. Again, the states all have different policies and different occupations on their lists that will open the door to state nomination. You need to score 65 points on the visa points test, but again, for the state nomination you score an actual 10 points actually, so it is better than the Subclass 190 visa in that you score more points for the Subclass 489 nomination than for the Subclass 190 nomination. You need to be accredited in that occupation, so that's that separate step of having your qualifications and work experience accredited prior to applying for the visa. And you also need to have competent English. So it is possible to apply for the Subclass 489 with the slightly lower level of English than proficient. Okay, so this altogether it means that many more people are eligible for the Subclass 489 visa than for either the 189 or the 190 visa. It's not a permanent visa, but it is a very clear pathway to permanent residence. So in many of our clients now are applying for the Subclass 489 visa in preference to applying for the 189 or the 190. But when we do the assessment of your eligibility, we will look at all of these different factors and work out what is your best visa strategy, and whether that lies through the 189 or the 489 is something that we will provide advice to you at the interview. Okay, I want to talk about at this point some potential changes that are occurring to the visa program. They've been flagged to commence in November this year, and it reflects part of the Australian government's policy in trying to encourage international students to study in regional Australia, and then also to apply for regional visas. So there will be new visas created that will allow people who have studied in regional Australia to apply for a skilled visa that then becomes permanent after 3 years of living in Australia. So this legislation has not yet commenced, but I think the Australian government is pretty keen to create this new pathway, and I would be pretty sure that it will only apply to new students who apply for a student visa after November 2019. That would mean that people who are already in Australia on a student visa would not be able to take advantage of that new visa pathway. Again, although the Australian government has said that it will create these new visa pathways, we really need to wait to see the legislation and the actual commencement of that visa pathway before we can start either relying on it or planning for it. But the government has announced it, and I would imagine that it will commence. For those people who are already in Australia on a student visa and who are looking to apply, then it comes down to whether you can be accredited, and that depends on your qualifications and work experience, and it depends whether you can apply for nomination in one of the states. At the moment, we are suggesting that people consider moving to Tasmania, either to study for 12 months to be able to apply, or to study for 2 years, or to South Australia, or to the Northern Territory. And the reason for that is that those states now have nomination policies that are more open than the policies in the major states. Yes, Queensland has a state nomination program, as does Victoria, Western Australia and New South Wales, but it is tighter, meaning it is more difficult to apply for nomination in those states than in the Northern Territory, Tasmania and South Australia. And that reflects the fact that the smaller states are trying to compete with the bigger states for both students and also for skilled migrants. Again, when you have the interview with Visa Australia, the assessment interview, we'll have a look very carefully at those state nomination policies and provide you with advice and a recommendation about what would be your overall best strategy for migrating to Australia with a skilled visa. Okay, so at the end of the day, to apply for the skilled visa, it's a legal process. You need to meet the criteria. If you meet the criteria, prepare a good application, you will get the visa. But what is it all about? Okay, from the perspective of the Australian government, it's a great deal because Australia is getting a steady stream of highly qualified, committed and experienced migrants who are able to slot into areas of demand in the economy and immediately start contributing to the economy of the Australian economy. But at the same time, the Australian government recognises that the work and effort of the people coming in by giving them certain benefits. And what are these benefits? Well, as a permanent resident, you're entitled to work in any occupation. So if you want, or not work at all, if you want to develop your surfing skills, then it's completely open to you to do that. Or if you want to continue to work as an engineer, then you can do that. You can study at Australian schools and universities, so your kids can go to Australian public schools that have good quality, and you can attend, as a permanent resident, you can attend Australian universities. You have access to the public hospitals and free health services. So one of the things about Australia is that the public health system is actually very good, as is the public education system. So it means that you don't have to necessarily have private health insurance or pay expensive school fees for your kids or university fees. So that feeds in basically to the quality of life in this country. You can buy a house, as there's no restrictions on that. You can travel as you want, back and forth between your countries, so there's no period of residence where you're stuck in Australia for a certain period of time and can't go home. You can sponsor family members to move to Australia, so in particular if you then fall in love with someone from your own country, you can sponsor either him or her to come to Australia with you, and that includes same-sex partners. You can also sponsor your parents in certain cases, with the caveat that your parents need to have at least 50% of children living in Australia for you to be able to sponsor them. So if you've got one sibling overseas and you're here, then you can sponsor your parents. But if you've got two brothers or sisters overseas and you're here, then you can't. And then the other thing is there's access to the social security system. So there's a system of support payments to unemployed people, to pensioners, child support payments if you have a child here, maternity and paternity payments that you can then access as a permanent resident. Finally, after 4 years living in Australia with, in total, including 1 year as a permanent resident, you can apply for Australian citizenship. And while that does not mean you have to spend the rest of your life in Australia, because in the modern world, people move about, and it's kind of accepted and understood that you may go back to your country for a period of time. It's not a sentence for the term of your natural life, but there's actually a lot of coming and going, and once you've got the passport, you can come and go as you please. You've got every right to come back to Australia. Australia will be your home. Okay, so that's the formal part of the of the presentation. And just to recap, so the skilled visa program, it's the heart of the Australian migration program. If you've got the qualifications and experience that the Australian government is looking for, and you're eligible for the visa and prepare a good application, you can expect to receive the visa. It is a process that takes 12 months at least to go through, and it's a fairly rigorous examination of the documentation that you have that supports the fact that you meet the legal criteria. The Australian Parliament makes the law, the Department of Immigration administers the law, and the visa application is nothing more than the evidence that you meet or don't meet the criteria. So that's the process. There's 160,000 permanent visas granted or will be granted this year, and it means that Australia is really looking for skilled and qualified people to come in and help build the Australian economy. Okay, then what do we do and who are we? So to be able to give advice about migration in Australia, you need to be registered with the Migration Agents Registration Authority. So that is the body that regulates migration agents. If we start, if we're incompetent or we start stealing money from our clients, then you can make a complaint to the MARA, and it's a body to protect consumers. Well, I've worked in the area for 15 years, and I've seen a lot now in terms of the skilled visa program. Good decisions, bad decisions. We've gone through review processes, and we've provided advice to thousands of people. Our success rate is a 98% success, and I will explain that that is in terms of visa applications lodged, and it is very rare that we have a visa application refused. But the nature of the system is that the real work occurs at the time of the accreditation, at the time of the state nomination, and then you've also got to get the level of English that you need to apply for the visa. Okay, so this is where the real work happens. If you get to the point of the visa application, then you can be very confident that if you're using Visa Australia, you will actually receive the visa. So we work under the Migration Agents Code of Conduct. We work under a written agreement with our clients, and that sets out what the visa strategy is, what the work is that needs to happen, who you need to pay, when, at what point, and then also how much you need to pay to Visa Australia, obviously, and what we do. Okay, we've got offices in Mexico City, and that office in Mexico City functions as a regional office for Central America and South America. So we've got people there that can answer your questions, your basic questions about what you need to do to take the first step in applying for the visa. Okay, I understand that people are asking about the difference between the Subclass 190 and the Subclass 489 visa. So I'm happy to clarify that. Effectively, both of them are state-nominated visas, so you need a state government to nominate you for the visa. The Subclass 190 visa is a permanent visa, and the Subclass 489 is the provisional 4-year visa. You get 5 points on the points test for the state nomination for the Subclass 190 visa, and you get 10 points for the state nomination for the Subclass 489 visa. So in fact it means that the Subclass 489 visa is easier to apply for. It's easier because you get extra points on the visa points test, but also the state governments are more generous with their nomination policies for people applying for the 489 visa. So each state government will have a set of policies for the 190 visa and a set of policies for the Subclass 489 visa. And so it's a question of going back and having a look at the nomination policies in each state and seeing which one actually will allow you best to apply for that particular visa. Okay, next question is whether in 2019 the ACT is going to become regional. And yes, we understand that the ACT will become a regional area for the purpose of the proposed new visa arrangements. So those were the arrangements that I said that they're not going to commence until November 2019, and we suspect that it'll be only for people who apply for a student visa after that date. But again, in its wisdom, in the government's wisdom, even though Canberra is the national capital, it will be designated as a regional area for the purpose of that new visa system. Again, we just have to wait to see what the actual regulations and policy are before we can even give advice, and that hasn't been published yet. So we know it's coming. We know it'll involve benefits for students who study in regional Australia. We know that the ACT will be considered a region. We highly suspect it won't benefit people who are already in Australia, who already have their student visas, because we'll be moving forward to encourage new people to come in to regional Australia. Okay, so this is for people both inside Australia and outside Australia. So if you're interested, so at Visa Australia we have 3 different consultations, and we try to focus that on the particular knowledge or the particular information that you want. So first, education advice. So if you're interested in coming to Australia to study and not at all interested in migrating, then you should have the education consultancy, and we'll go through a description of how what you need to do to enrol in a course, the kinds of courses that you can enrol in, and also the process of applying for a student visa. Secondly, if you're vaguely thinking about migrating, but you're not certain whether you want to or not because you don't have enough information to make a decision, then you should have the express consultation. And in that, we'll just go through the broad parameters of the visa system for you, timeframes, documents, processes, and costs, and give you the information that you would then need to take forward to a decision to have the formal legal assessment. So the legal assessment is where we do a detailed assessment of your eligibility for one of the skilled visas, and we'll look at your qualifications, your work experience, take into account your level of English, take into account the accreditation rules and the state nomination rules and the visa points test, and provide you with really quite detailed advice about what you will need to do to migrate. The legal assessment, and in fact all of these assessments can be done in English or in Spanish, if your level of English is a little bit not up to having a consultation in English. So the way that the next step that you need to do if you want to go ahead with the assessment or with one of those interviews is to book a consultation. So if you visit the Visa Australia homepage and go to book a consultation, you'll be able to select a time for the interview that is in Australian office hours, obviously, but is also at a time that's convenient for you, and to make the payment for the assessment. The legal assessment costs $350, and the express and the student visa assessment is less. You need to pay the assessment fee, send us your documents, book a time for the consultation, and then we'll go ahead with that over Skype. Or you're welcome to come into the office in Canberra if you'd like to have it in person. So we're approaching the end of the seminar. These are our contact details. If you've got further questions, please send us an email to info@visaaustralia.com. Please feel free to call. So with the wonders of the internet, it's always possible to call the office directly from overseas. Please try not to call in the middle of the night, because we won't answer the phone if that occurs. But I mean, we're here from 9 to 5, from 8 to 6 every day, working away on these visa applications. So feel free to call us. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the seminar. So I'd like to thank you for your attendance. There's quite a bit of information that we've gone through today as an overview to the way that the skilled visa system works. It's been an overview rather than drilling down into particular questions, and if people are in Australia, you may already have a level of knowledge that is more in advance of the information that we've given. But if you're offshore, outside Australia, or haven't had the opportunity to think about it or research it, then I hope you found the presentation helpful. If you've got particular questions, then please feel free to contact us and to organise a time for the assessment. We'd be more than happy to go through the questions with you and provide detailed, accurate professional advice, and then we'd be happy to work with you to bring the application to a successful conclusion. So, and on that note, my name's Nick Houston, and I'd like to thank you again for attending. People that joined will receive a special offer for a discounted interview price, so keep your eyes out for that, and I look forward to meeting you and assisting you migrate to Australia. Okay, good afternoon, thanks a lot, see you.